Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 666 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. This is Instant Analysis for AEW Full Gear 2024. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, just moments after AEW Full Gear went off the air to break down everything that happened on the company's penultimate pay-per-view of 2024. We will go through every single match on the card. We will provide you results, analysis, grades, and so much more. And at the end of the show, we will not only remind you of our pre-show expectation grades, but provide you with a post-show grade as well. All of that coming up on this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Before we get into that, allow the Silver King to get into this. A reminder that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Over's Cast, Blue Sky at Getting Over for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. It is where you can vote in our pre and post show polls. You can leave questions and comments for the show. I saw some of you got back to us about AEW Full Gear. We'll likely take those questions and comments on Thursday in our next AEW episode. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
And I sure hope you do as well, because for $5 a month, $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Our next one is coming on Monday. That is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Normally at this juncture of the show, the Silver King would crack open a cold one, something special that we do for our pay-per-view instant analysis. But because I'm riding solo, I don't want a beautiful beverage to get warm, so it's going to stay in the refrigerator. We'll bring some back out for WWE Survivor Series War Games. The next time we'll have one of these instant analysis podcasts, literally same bat time, same bat channel, 1 week from right now. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the AEW Full Gear instant analysis. We're going to start with, of course, the main card. We'll go to 0 hour after. We'll give you grades at the very end. We're not going to go in direct opposite order of the way the matches were presented. We will, of course, start with the main event. We're going to go based on what the Silver King felt were the most important matches, work our way down the card. As always, we'll break down every single match. If you remember the last time we did an AEW instant analysis, we did it a little shorthand just because of some issues with my schedule due to work. We're not going to go shorthand. I was able to get most of the show in relatively complete. So yeah, we're going to do what we normally do from an instant analysis standpoint. We'll compare and contrast the two, and we'll see what we do going forward for these AEW pay-per-views during football season. But as I said, let's get to the AEW Full Gear instant analysis, and we will indeed start where the show left off. The AEW Championship, Jon Moxley defending against Orange Cassidy. Orange backstage said AEW will send a message to the Death Riders and take the power back, proving the company does not need Mox. He pulled up, Mox did, to the arena wearing a hoodie, making a casual entrance for the main event. Cassidy attacked Mox with 2 orange punches immediately at the bell and bit his forehead before Mox took over and OC bladed. They were outside for like 10 minutes in a regular match, no counting, nothing like that. Mox just continuously destroyed him with brute shots, gotch pile driver, etc. He booted his head over and over, with Cassidy acting defiant while getting bloodier. They dug nails into each other's backs. Mox then hit Orange with a forearm to a counter of a high risk. Orange got a mini run, only to eat a cutter counter right as they began trading punches and forearms, and Cassidy, showing fight, he's a huge badass. He stuck his damn hands in his pockets. He did his dumb kicks, and he took over with orange punches, really. He kipped up after getting leveled with a clothesline and hit beach break. Death Riders came out. They surrounded the ring. Jim Ross said the referee should preemptively toss them. Great point. They should have. Conglomeration, sans Mark Briscoe for some reason, came out to save, with Marina Shafir standing in the ring with the briefcase, just waiting and doing nothing. She could have nailed Cassidy with it 2, 3, 4 times. She did nothing, Willow Nightingale ran in and speared her ass. We saw Mox clearly see Orange grab the briefcase, but he allowed himself to get hit with it anyway for a false finish. Mox then pulled the referee down. That allowed Wheeler Yuta to hit Bazaiku knee on Cassidy, with Mox adding Death Rider to retain the title. This did get some heel heat, but I wouldn't say it got a huge reaction. It was also immensely similar to the two matches that directly preceded it, in that the champion or the main force was dominant throughout, with the babyface getting hope spots, but brief hope spots, before ultimately succumbing. That made it feel quite repetitive, when it perhaps could have otherwise stood on its own more uniquely if the other matches were booked differently. The idea was Cassidy showing guts, standing up to Mox, taking his best shots, with the heels needing to cheat to survive. But Orange did not do nearly enough in the match for Mox to need an out like that. It actually made him look weak. Really, the only thing that bothered Mox was the briefcase shot, which wouldn't have happened if Shafir didn't get in the ring with the briefcase. Normally, heels looking weak and chicken shit, that's okay. But this is not at all the vibe that Mox's group is going for, nor how they should be presented, especially at this early stage of their gimmick. You'll remember with Roman Reigns and the Tribal Chief character, he beat the shit and dominated people. And it was eventual down the line, like I think 2 years plus, where he cheated to win every single match to retain his title and continue his reign. But at the beginning, he was a dominant champion. Mox should be dominating people like he did in this match, but also winning in that dominant fashion. It was key that color was saved for this match, with it not running rampant across the show as has been so typical on past AEW pay-per-views. That allowed it to be far more impactful when Orange bladed, as opposed to it just being another match with blood. That did happen too early in the bout, the blading, but it was okay. It was worked throughout. All in all, from a match quality standpoint, it was fine. Not exciting enough to main event, frustrating at its dragged out length, though that's to be expected for a main event for the final match on a card. Mox was the obvious and necessary winner, so that was the correct decision. I wouldn't really say Cassidy came off as a believable challenger. He's been more believable in prior matches. I know he got the false finish, but again, it was with a briefcase, right? I'm at 3.5 stars and a B. I have a feeling people will grade it higher. I can't get there. Willow coming out, that was great, totally logical, and it was actually precisely what the Silver King predicted on the Ultimate Preview. Finally, one woman backstage gives a flying F about AEW, and they are willing to go after Shafir. Why it took her so long? Who knows? Why none of the other women in the company care about AEW and neutralizing Shafir? Who knows? At least it finally happened. Now, Mox ranted after the bell as Yuta grabbed some disinfectant or something and poured it on Cassidy's head, really for no reason whatsoever. That brought Hangman Page down with a chair. He drilled Yuta in the face and then stared down Mox. Christian Cage then ran in, caught Mox with kill switch, only to see Page holding his contract. Hangman handed it over and left, but Christian delayed and delayed and delayed and waited and waited and waited for some reason, not taking advantage of this incredible opportunity to win the AEW championship. That was all, so Jay White could get in the ring and hit him with Blade Runner. Christian barely sold that, like waking up immediately, grabbing the contract, sliding out of the ring. Then White got attacked by the Death Riders, and they all got out of Dodge together. White, for some reason, stood watching them run away. He goes, I should probably chase him with a chair. Grabs a chair, runs after them. In the parking lot, a strangely painted, graffitied car, clearly owned by Darby Allin, crashed into the pickup getaway vehicle. So Mox went to the valet stand, stole some keys, drove off in another SUV. He just happened to grab the keys for the car that was waiting right there. Darby, who was bloodied from, getting himself in an accident, got on top of the pickup truck. They were gone. The heels are gone. Starts slamming his skateboard into the hood and the windshield, and then the show ended. You could literally hear a pin drop as all this transpired. The stuff that happened in the arena. Hangman coming out at first, it got some murmurs, but fans probably wondered why a guy who, spoiler alert, lost his singles match earlier in the show, a guy who was a full-fledged heel, mind you, was taking out Yuta of all people, and happy to just not attack Mox at all. Yes, they have legitimate history, but why did he even come out there in the first place? Was it because he was furthering his association with Christian? and he was holding on to the contract to ensure he keeps his word? If so, why has that not been a continuously told story? Why is it something that goes away for a month and then just comes back when it's convenient? Why would you put it on the back burner to such a great degree? Then you have Christian out there to take advantage of the situation. Cool, perfect, except he sets himself up for success and doesn't go for it, probably because I guess White was just super late to the ring, a timing issue at best. But Christian, he hits kill switch, and then he just stands there. Wouldn't you hit it again, level him with a chair shot, use the contract, sign the contract, cash in, use the briefcase? And if you're a Hangman and you're running up there to help Christian because you have a deal, why would you not also go after Mox? Because now you're confronting him and you remember, oh, I hate this guy and I was a babyface last time I hated this guy. Like, it's just so frustrating. Also, Hangman and Christian are both heels. So the first people out to confront Mox, and by the way, save Orange, even though he had rolled outside the ring. I know they didn't come out to save Orange, but that's what people thought was happening because they were running out after a babyface was in the middle of getting hurt and beaten down, whatever the case. But they're both heels, so that was confusing for the fans. White is then out there because commentary told us he hates Christian for hurting him, wants to prevent him from winning the title. Completely logical, 100%. But why did the Death Riders attack White when he, a babyface, was actually helping Moxley retain the title because he hates Christian? The crowd was just as confused and befuddled with all the chaos watching this, silently taking it in and just kind of waiting to see, like, is someone going to come out where we get this big babyface run in and like we get to pop for them? Like Darby, if Darby had run in, save Orange, done some of this stuff, fought, let's say, Claudio to the back, and then all the rest of this happened, perhaps it would have made more sense. But they did the Darby pop last in the parking lot outside the arena. But when you get to Darby, you have a guy who lost to Mox 2 months ago and lost to the B-man of the group in Claudio Castagnoli literally 4 days ago. He's coming in as the savior at the end. He's really the only full-fledged babyface out of the 4 guys involved here. I'd be okay with calling White one, just not to the same degree. So Hangman's out there as a heel. Christian doesn't take advantage of his opportunity as a heel. White gets attacked just because, and Allen, the loser, serves as the greatest threat to the existence of the Death Riders. I saw some people saying the big names have finally come to save AEW. That's been a criticism that we've had, throughout this storyline. No, they haven't. Hangman was out there for himself and or Christian. Christian was out there for himself. White was out there for himself. Darby is literally the only significant name who was there specifically because he hates the Death Riders and wants to take Mox down and quote unquote save AEW. Those are the facts. I mean, yeah, the conglomeration losers also, but we already know they're worthless. So yeah, man, the end of the show was a bunch of whatever. And judging by the crowd reaction, it's the second or third show in a row that ended in similar fashion with a quiet crowd watching. Maybe they liked it. Maybe they were entertained, but you're not having any of these moments, this big babyface wins or babyface saves. And if you're telling people to spend $50 to watch a pay-per-view, you got to have stuff happen where they come out of there saying, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. I can't wait to see if this guy is going to get over on this guy. You could say that maybe a little bit about Darby, but I'll remind you, he literally just lost to both of these guys clean, Mox and Claudio. So is he going to be that savior? It is immensely tough to say. And that was, by the way, the ending of a heel-heavy show, which we predicted coming in, but it did play itself out. So let's go ahead and talk about everything else that happened on AEW Full Gear. We had Swerve Strickland against Bobby Lashley. This was the penultimate match with everyone ringside. Lashley totally overpowered and dominated Strickland early. Shelton Benjamin got ejected for tripping Swerve, who Lashley caught for a slam on the ring apron. Swerve came back with an apron DDT. Lashley didn't even bump, but he sold it anyway. Swerve jumped off the steel steps to Swerve stomp a leaning Lashley through the announce table, which was easily the best and most legitimate execution of that move ever. He came back with house call only to, you guessed it, try another Swerve stomp that connected for a false finish. Lashley speared Swerve through a barricade portion after MVP allowed him to recover. Then he speared Swerve again in the ring and locked in the Hurt Lock. Swerve was already knocked out, and he got the win via knockout. Lashley put Prince Nana in the Hurt Lock after the bell, I guess for good measure, even though it wasn't necessary. Same name on the finisher, by the way, Hurt Lock, just like almost everything that's happening with Hurt Syndicate. This was absolutely the right winner, as discussed on the Ultimate Preview. Lashley looked strong, beating Swerve in a mostly dominant fashion, given some of the longer and more thorough beatings that Swerve has taken at the hands of others recently. If you're going to introduce them as a group, you can't pussyfoot around them being dominant from the jump. On the other side of the coin, Swerve has now lost 3 straight pay-per-view matches, dropping the title to Bryan Danielson, falling to Hangman in the lights out steel cage, and now getting beat by Lashley in what should have been his debut, but of course wasn't because they wasted it on television. So both guys have been consistent losers coming out of that match, Swerve and Hangman. That might be purposeful. We'll see. It's something to watch going forward. 3.5 stars B, just given this was much lower before Swerve got his table spot and his quick flurry. It was really just a beatdown from Lashley. And again, this match and Mox and Orange were immensely similar to one another, the way they were laid out. That's a producer issue, and that's people not talking to each other. Jay White fought Hangman Page. This was 4th on the show. It started much slower than I expected. White hit a Snapdragon suplex on the apron and another ringside, but Page soon countered him and worked an injured leg ankle that was being worked on throughout the entire match. White crawled from the ramp all the way to the ring to break the count and eventually hit a Uranagi after a really long counter sequence, moving into a figure 4 leg lock that was inverted. Hangman came back with 2 Deadeyes. They countered Buckshot Lariat into Blade Runner, into Deadeye, into an ankle lock, into Blade Runner for the clean 1-2-3 for Jay. White then taunted Page, flashing the 5 in his face for 5 straight wins in their long-time series. Hangman chased White down the ramp, landing basically a single blow. Then he punched Christopher Daniels when he tried to calm Page down. So he punches an AEW official, doesn't get kicked out of the building, and remains there to get involved after the main event. Just take that logic for good measure there. Speaking of 5, the finishing sequence was a 5 out of 5, and it helped elevate a match that was somewhat uneven in parts. I believe I gave their first match in AEW, I want to say 4.5 stars, maybe 4.25. This was definitely lower than that. I put it at 4 stars, A-. The booking surprised. It didn't bother me. There appears to be intention behind Page losing. Of course, we've said that before, only to not have it pull through. In this case, White holding his record over Page, who remains unhinged, and he suffered another loss. That is something interesting. The problem is that AEW has really failed to capitalize off of Hangman beating Swerve in that lights out steel cage match. The dude won a brutal war. Then he falls to White on consecutive pay-per-views. Meanwhile, you have Swerve, who has now dropped 3 straight matches. White, at this point, should unquestionably be the number 1 contender for the AEW title. But it doesn't fit with what Mox is doing. I presume he'll just slide into the Continental Classic, and maybe he fights Hangman again there and Page gets his win. But there's really no reason that White is not focused on the big belt. And again, when you circle back to the main event segment, yeah, the Death Riders attacked him, but he came out to thwart Christian. He didn't come out for the AEW title. So we'll have to see if he circles around to that, if they're going to try to do a fatal 4-way with all those guys involved in a title match. I'm not exactly sure where all of this is going. And I feel like when you leave a pay-per-view, you always want to be excited, wondering what's going to happen next, but you also want to have a level of clarity on what to expect. And I don't believe there's any clarity right now in what's going on with AEW. Will Ospreay fought Kyle Fletcher. This was the midpoint of the show. Fletcher came out with white tights rather than pants, which was successfully differentiating when it came to Ospreay, who was in black pants, but it was a strange look for him. Kyle did a ringside brainbuster and later counter Michinoku driver. Ospreay landed a sky twister ringside, torture rack Liger bomb inside. Fletcher countered Ozcutter with a neck breaker and hit a last ride style Liger bomb himself. Will came back with a ringside tombstone and an interior corkscrew plancha. Fletcher ducked Hidden Blade for a counter sequence ending in a Spanish fly. He no-sold that to counter Hidden Blade with a lariat. Then Will hit Hidden Blade immediately. Ospreay countered a turnbuckle brainbuster attempt into Styles Clash, then landed a really tight Hidden Blade for a false finish. He went to hit Tiger Driver into the steel steps, but Kyle countered for a tombstone into them, and it did kind of look like Will landed on the top of his head. He seemed okay. He sold the whole tingling arm from the match build. Fletcher then hit a leg lariat and a straight drop pile driver, like an inverted tombstone that he calls the Grimstone. That also looked like Will landed on his head. That was an arm lift kick out. He added a brainbuster on the top turnbuckle and got the clean win over Ospreay. It was a fantastic match. Right for me between 4.5 stars A, 4.75 stars A+. I'm going to rewatch it this week. I'll give you a final grade on Thursday, but it's going to be right in between those one way or the other. I got this one wrong. I figured Hangman was going to win the other match, so I got both of these wrong. That's my point. So I got a babyface and heel. I said they were going to split. I just flipped the actual results. It made sense to put Fletcher over Ospreay here, and it was Will's third singles loss in the last 6 months, which is refreshing for a guy as over as he is, who will clearly be a future world champion, most likely next year. It's what I wish WWE actually did more of. Show some vulnerability, even in its most popular babyface superstars. Ospreay will undoubtedly win the AEW title soon. The question is where he goes next and when he ultimately gets strapped up. I presume both of them will wind up in the Continental Classic, Ospreay and Fletcher. Maybe Will gets his win back as part of that tournament, and that leads to a rubber match, probably at the Australia show in 2025. As for Fletcher, it's just going to be interesting to see if this push goes any deeper than a long-term feud with Ospreay. He clearly flashes a lot of potential. He's exceeded expectations when it comes to the character and promo department. He now has a big win over Ospreay. The question is, what do they do next with him? And do they just keep him kind of, I don't want to call it a vortex, but in the Ospreay vortex for the foreseeable future? The International Championship was on the line. Konosuke Takeshita defending against Ricochet. This match was added Thursday night out of the blue, so we didn't even cover it on the Ultimate Preview. My prediction would have been Takeshita. It was third to last on the card. Ricochet sold a shoulder that was worked constantly to the point he could not do a catapult at all, except he not only did some later, he did shoulder tackles and springboards and everything. Takeshita hit a spinning bossman slam. Ricochet came back with a handspring tope and a springboard 450. No shoulder issue there. Don Callis jumped off commentary. Takeshita hit Blue Thunderbomb for, I guess, a false finish. Then a wheelbarrow German suplex. Takeshita added a release avalanche German suplex with a nasty landing for an arm lift. Ricochet hit Hurricanrana, Poison Rana, and a shooting star press in succession. He missed his dumb new finisher. Takeshita countered him into a cradle tombstone. Ricochet did a twisting brainbuster with Takeshita catching him on the top rope for an avalanche Michinoku driver to retain the title. Commentary completely failed to sell the finish, call the move, anything. It was super awkward. This surprised me perhaps more than any match on the show, in that it was basically an elongated TV match between two excellent wrestlers on a pay-per-view. I appreciated that there was a clear match story, but partially grounding Ricochet as that story literally took away from what makes him a special attraction. And then the shoulder and back injuries, they became a total non-factor in the latter stages of the match. Ricochet was able to do whatever he wanted. It never hit fourth gear, despite us seeing them wrestle incredibly well together previously. I'm at 3.75 stars B+. I understand some of you might be higher. I can't get there for this, given the way it ran for the first, I would say, 3/4 of the match. Mariah May had her championship champagne celebration. On Rampage, Mariah and Mina Shirakawa beat Nyla Rose and Harley Cameron for some reason in 9 minutes. There wasn't even like further character development or anything, and it probably could have used some. Mina hosted this celebration, calling Mariah the love of her life. May had a black eye. She said, "There's not a woman alive who can touch her," calling Shirakawa her one true friend. They did a cross-arm toast and danced, only for Mariah to try and break a bottle over Mina's head. She ducked and then kicked the bottle out of Mariah's hand, so May spit on her, and then Mina speared her off of the stage onto a table. She bit a blood capsule, and Mariah played it like she was knocked out cold. So Mina picked her lifeless head up and licked her blood from her mouth all over her forehead. And I'm asking,
are you fucking kidding me?
Perhaps the turn by May will be explained because she thought Shirakawa was trying to take her spotlight. You'll remember she was standing in front of her during that promo segment, I think earlier this week. But really, she doesn't have much reason to go after someone who legitimately kowtowed to her at every turn. It's fine that we didn't get a Toni Storm return here, but by comparison, this was immensely lackluster. I do wonder if the idea of May hitting her head is almost to send her into a similar timeless gimmick to what Storm was doing. Like, because of a head injury, she thinks she's back in the 1940s or something. But honestly, that's really all I have to say about this. TBS Championship was on the line. Mercedes Moné defending against Chris Statlander. Moné backstage berated Camille for basically being stupid and worthless. She went to stand up for herself, but stopped, allowing Mercedes to continue ranting while telling her to go watch from backstage. Unlike with MJF and Wardlow, we've been given no reason why Camille needs to put up with this bullshit, to the point she can't even speak up for herself. She literally is the worst heavy of all time. It seems like they're trying to say that's part of the story. Maybe it always has been. Maybe they're trying to rectify it on the back end. Whatever it is, it's not working. This was the third match on the card. Moné hit a nice Meteora off the apron, another in the ring, trying to grab the rope on the fall. Mercedes also countered a powerbomb from Stat by rotating over her body for a neck breaker. You could argue this singularly was Moné's best spot since joining AEW. Stat countered a fourth Meteora attempt into a buckle bomb and hit Chaos Theory. Mercedes came back with a crucifix bomb, Moné statement, and a counter sequence backstabber. Moné connected on her fifth Meteora attempt. Stat sold a knee on a tilt-a-roll backbreaker, but was able to deadlift Moné out of a pinning combination for Saturday Night Fever in a false finish. Mercedes hit three amigos, but when she jumped for a frog splash, Stat was already on her feet. She turned that into an F5 for a false finish. We'll come back to that. Moné avoided a 450, went after her knee, and did a tadpole splash almost, following with a few backstabbers and her gory style finisher for a 2.7 kickout. Stat caught Moné on her shoulders for a flat splash. Then she turned her inside out into Saturday Night Fever, but Moné literally bit her leg, hung her neck up in the middle rope, and won with a pinning combination in what was the longest singles match in AEW history at just shy of 20 minutes. It was also one of the best women's matches in AEW history. To get the grade out of the way, it was an A. I kept flipping between 4.25 and 4.5 stars. I will watch this again along with Ospreay and Fletcher to decide. It'll probably be 4.25 though when all is said and done. Stat getting such a huge babyface hero moment on that kick out when fans really had no reason to root for her, at least coming into the match. That was odd, but they did pop big for it. It also felt like a step too far just because Mercedes did so much before with multiple backstabbers and multiple Meteoras, and then she hit her gory finisher, and then Stat just kicked out. As far as the wrestling was concerned, these two worked extremely well together, and this was, I think, Moné's best match in AEW to date. You could argue the Stephanie Vaquer match. I'd have to watch them both again, but this was at least up there, if not a match that exceeded it. The Eddie Guerrero and Brock Lesnar callback with the frog splash caught into an F5, that was a really cool spot. And this is probably a match and feud that should really get run back when Mercedes is women's champion and they want to put the title on Stat. I would stay away from it until then from a creative standpoint. There was fantastic chemistry between both of them. It was easily the match of the night at the time it ended. Probably one of my top 3 favorite matches of the entire night. Maybe my second favorite match of the entire night. I'm glad this got so much time because it was the only women's match on the show. It also told a story with Stat finally being built as a babyface despite what she did to her friend. We really should get some atonement for her from that entire situation. But if you're going to just skip over it and turn the page and go with this, then you got to make her look like a babyface. And Mercedes definitely made her look like a babyface in this. I thought there would be a redemptive moment from Camille, whether it was getting Mercedes back and Moné being happy about it, or literally costing Moné the title with Stat winning. There were 2 great options with Camille. They didn't go with either, which leads you to believe that Camille may just step up as Mercedes' upcoming challenger at some point over the next couple of months. But we've already seen her get flattened by Stat in 5 minutes and be a total joke in this division. So why should we believe that she's a legitimate challenger at any point? You can't, at least not now. The TNT title was on the line. Jack Perry defending against Daniel Garcia. This was definitely the popcorn match on the show. Perry powerbombed Garcia through the timekeeper's table after like 8 minutes. One segment after another table spot, by the way. He dumped a bunch of garbage on him too, and it slowed from there with Jack deliberately taking Danny apart. He threw the title at Garcia, daring him to DQ himself. He almost did, but refused. That gave Perry an opening for a low blow and a running knee as the referee's back was turned. Garcia hit a pile driver. Perry then just offered himself up for another one. He stood perfectly fine. He did the Raven thing with his arms. So Garcia did it. Then he put him in the Dragon Slayer, sharpshooter, whatever you want to call it. Perry reached the ropes. The referee didn't break the hold because Garcia dragged him back into the ring for a submission to win the TNT title. Garcia then walked off, draping himself in an AEW flag that just so happened to be there. Now, this was a good decision to switch the title and strap up Garcia close enough to his home in the Northeast. Idiotic booking and finish with Perry giving himself up while standing on 2 feet, completely capable of continuing to wrestle. It's one thing if however many years old Ric Flair is down on his knees, knows he's beaten, says, finish me, Sean, take me out. That's one thing. A perfectly capable, I'm guessing 26-year-old on both feet in the middle of a match, sticking his arms out saying, hit me with another pile driver, dude, come beat me. And then losing is just ridiculous. What's the explanation? Why was Perry upset afterwards that he lost the title if he literally gave himself up? And why did Garcia storm out and not soak in his big moment in the lone title change of the entire show? I'm glad AEW pulled the trigger on Garcia. I'm glad they did it in this spot. I just did not like the match or the booking. 3 stars B-. I actually think I'm being generous with that. Roderick Strong fought MJF. MJF grabbed a mic after the opening bell, saying he's making millions shooting movies away from the stupid AEW fans, while Strong's mom is shooting his dad. Just right back to that eye-rolling shit from the go-home that didn't hit when he said it and really has no relevance in the rest of the story. MJF worked Strong's hand, which got ruined into the post and turnbuckle. Roddy did a torture rack buckle bomb, which was really unique, plus an Olympic slam, but the hand prevented him from maintaining a Texas cloverleaf. He hit End of Heartache. MJF got a rope break. Then Roddy basically missed a gutbuster, but hit a Claymore. MJF countered End of Heartache into his brainbuster, but he didn't cover, despite that being his newly established finisher that he's been deploying of late. In fact, not only did MJF not cover, after getting hit with the move, Strong covered MJF. Obviously, that's illogical, and of course, it was also a near fall. MJF moved over him immediately after that for Salt of the Earth, and he manipulated the fingers and hand, which was already injured, for a near immediate submission. He grabbed a chair. He snapped Strong's arm in the chair after the bell, with Adam Cole and Undisputed Kingdom not saving until after his friend was already injured. Kyle O'Reilly was also out. He shoved Cole, saying he was either late or it was his fault or whatever the case might be. I got to tell you, this entire thing was shockingly rough. The match had like zero energy, never even got out of second gear. Roddy, who is fantastic in the ring, having a poor match with MJF, who's had a ton of excellent matches in AEW, arguably some of the best. Those two coming together for something this week was shocking to me. I've hated this storyline since it began. I still figured the match would bang. I said that on the Ultimate Preview. Nope. 2.25 stars and a C. I cannot go higher than that. This post-match was whatever, basically the same shit as the go-home Dynamite, except now Strong has a broken arm or something. The Tag Team Championship was on the line. Private Party, Outrunners, Kings of the Black Throne, and the Acclaimed in a 4-way. This opened the show. Max Caster put himself over and literally threw the microphone at Anthony Bowens to end his rap, which continues the split between them. Later, the fans hate chanted him. Unfortunately, this was the boring rules with 2 legal men. Party hit stereo 450s. Brody King 8 total recall for a broken fall. Acclaimed were both tagged in, doing the old New Age Outlaw spot of trying to pin your partner to win the titles. Caster blind tagged Bowens, preventing what might have been a crucifix for the pin. He called for their finishing sequence, but mic drop was interrupted with Party hitting Gin and Juice to retain the titles. Throne was basically sidelined for the final 3, 4, 5 minutes of the match, a total non-factor in this. This is not what I would call a great showing for what should have been a much better tag team division. It felt like the entire match served solely as a way of telling the Acclaimed story. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad AEW had in-match storytelling. But for the new champions to get nothing and thrown to be marginalized in this way was rough. It's like what we talk about with WWE and their tag team division right now. Motor City Machine Guns, it's cool that they're champions. They are the least important tag team in that division. I wouldn't say Private Party is the least important tag team in the AEW division right now, but when it came to this match, they were the least important team in the match, and there was zero focus on them. I forgot if I gave the grade already, but 2.75 stars, C+. Big Boom AJ fought QT Marshall on 0 Hour. There was a weigh-in for this on Rampage. They each said one line. AJ mentioned the chocolate chunk cookie. Is he trying to sound like Cookie Monster when he says that, or is that just like what he does? Then he repeated that the Rizzler would ring the bell. He got a pop. The kid didn't come out. The scale was rigged for AJ to look heavy from all the cookies. So the kid, his son, cut a promo for 15 seconds, and then AJ ate a cutter from QT so the heel could stand tall in the go-home moment. Paul White returned to walk the Rizzler to his seat. It was here I learned that AJ is from Boca Raton, Florida, which means he attends my local Costco. I don't live in Boca Raton, but that's the closest Costco to me. That blew my mind that all of this shit, this guy's entire social media persona and all this stuff around this guy was literally happening in my backyard, and I had absolutely no idea whatsoever. I was legitimately at that Costco on Friday. His trunks were also pizzas. This was obviously a slow, plodding, mostly terrible match, but that was not the point. AJ kicked out of the cutter. White then chased QT away from the Rizzler with, I can't believe I'm saying these words, with AJ hitting a superplex. Aaron Solo interfered, leading to the kid, his actual son, entering the ring for a pretty decent spear on Marshall. AJ hit the power bomb for the win. The crowd popped for the finish. That's all that mattered. Plus, it was cool to see all three of them get cheered by the fans. This was a completely harmless and relatively okay appearance. It's just not something I want with any regularity. But for a TikTok celebrity match, these guys delivered. They deserve the pops they got. 1.5 stars, D+. But again, it's not an actual... The match grade doesn't matter at all. That was not the point of the entire deal. This whole match reminded me of that scene from The Big Lebowski where like Walter brings his ex-wife Cynthia's Pomeranian bowling and the dude is so upset about it. And Walter's like, dude, I didn't bring the Pomeranian bowling. I didn't buy it shoes. It's not taking your effing turn, dude. Point being, anyone upset that this Big Boom AJ guy was on this card, it's not like he took the spot of someone else, okay? They got some social media pop. We'll see if it translates into anything, whether ticket sales, I don't know. They did sell 10,000 plus for the show. That was a positive. I don't think people were paying to go see AJ. Maybe some buys, maybe just increased interest on 0 Hour. People tuning into TV to see what the hell this entire thing is about. Didn't prove itself out in the ratings on Wednesday, but of course, he also wasn't on that Dynamite show in front of fans. It wasn't advertised, I don't think, that he would be there. They did the backstage promo segment. So all in all, like harmless. And I hope people see this as completely harmless. Anna Jay fought Deonna Purrazzo on 0 Hour. This match was added Friday afternoon. There was obviously some inkling of this being a TV feud, but going right to the match without even interaction between them. Remember, we only saw Taya Valkyrie confronting Jay. That was ridiculous even for 0 Hour. Taya speared Anna ringside in clear view of the referee. He kicked her out, but did not end the match in a DQ. Jay then countered Purrazzo doing disarm her for the win. So this Vendetta group is pretty much already dead in the water. 2.25 stars C. Commander Buddy Matthews, the Beast Mortos, and Dante Martin fought in a 4-way on 0 Hour. This is literally the definition of doing something just to do it. Like, come on. Commander did his awesome tightrope plancha, then plancha again, I said it twice, then missed a tightrope shooting star press. Mortos caught him with a lung blower, and Martin with a pop-up Samoan drop. Buddy hit a jackhammer. Commander did a springboard Poison Rana. Buddy caught Martin on a cover with Seth Rollins stomp for the win. Would have been legitimately angry if Matthews didn't pick up this dub on a 0 Hour match with these as his other competitors. He even got chants from the fans after the bell, and he was pumping them up and shit. Did Tony Khan see that? Who the fuck knows? I hope someone notices that Buddy is still the best kept secret and deserves a push. I hope he is in the Continental Classic, and I don't expect him to win if he is in, but I hope he's not there just as jobber fodder for everyone else. Put him in the tournament, 3.25 stars and a B for the match. So that wraps up the instant analysis for AEW Full Gear. It allows us to move to our grades for the show. First, a reminder of our pre-show expectation grades. The Silver King came in on the Ultimate Preview with a flat B, a high B though, the highest end, an 86 out of 100. All of you are getting overheads, had an opportunity to share your grades on Twitter before the show. And this is a wild range of votes, unlike we have seen ahead of, I think, any show for either company since this podcast has existed. 3% A, 40.5% B, 40.5% C, 16% D to F. That averaged out to a 78.5 out of 100, rounded up to a 79. But I'm personally going to go ahead and boost that a partial grade because I cannot see how anyone could give a D or F expectation grade to a card that was this high quality. Even if you dislike the booking for AEW, you have to admit that the card was immensely strong from a wrestling perspective. So I'm slightly overriding the listeners. I'm going to call that an 80 out of 100, B- for their pre-show expectation grade. Still the lowest pre-show grade that I can remember for any special event since the show began. It is possible one of the Blood Money in the Sand shows got a very low grade, but I believe that happened before the podcast began, this version at least of the podcast began. In terms of the post-show grades, I will go with all of yours first, and then the Silver King will follow up at the end. The way you all voted: 19% A to A-, 32% B plus to B, 18% B- to C plus, and I believe that would be 31% C or lower. That averages out to an 82.5. Let's round it up to an 83 out of 100 or a B. And I will note there is still 39 minutes left on the poll as of our taping of this show. So it's possible those numbers change slightly, but the distribution was pretty clear. The majority of voters thought this was between B plus and B or C or lower. The A to A- and B- to C plus were the minorities of this vote. And I understand what you all are getting at. I was of a significantly mixed opinion about an AEW pay-per-view for the second show in a row. As I mentioned earlier, it's unfair to say that every match on the show was exactly the same. It is fair to say that many of the matches were the same, and plenty were immensely similar to one another. Long, drawn-out injury cells, multiple false finishes, despite wrestlers hitting their finishers as part of big sequences late in matches, heels looking dominant for extremely long stretches, while babyfaces took punishment and only got a couple of brief hope spots. There were not as many even matches as you would expect. There were some. The Mercedes stat match, I think Jay White and Hangman, those are two examples of super even matches. But there were significant portions of this show that were just, as a viewer, downers. I thought the middle stretch was by far the strongest, which meant Full Gear suffered, as many AEW pay-per-views do, from having too many matches. Cut one or two off from each end, and you have a tight, action-packed show that does not leave viewers, or more importantly, the people in attendance, exhausted by the time it was over. And people over that final hour were absolutely exhausted in the crowd. They popped for big spots. You heard your oohs and you got your AEW chants, which really, I found this kind of funny. Outside of like chants against Max Caster, and I think maybe Mercedes Moné as well, the crowd reaction at AEW shows, it's literally ooh when there's a big move, or AEW. That's like it. There's very little variety. It would be very easy to do the AEW crowd for a video game because that's pretty much all you would need to do. But I digress. Let me get away from that. The crowd was hot in parts, and there were, it seems 10,000 people there, though there were a couple of really weird camera angles where like they showed the hard cam side, the floor seats, and there were empty rows of people. I guess those are the most expensive seats. Maybe people didn't buy them. Maybe they were saved for family that got up and went back and forth. It's possible. But I just noticed that as the show was going on. Anyway, I would call it a successful show. Is it something that is at all memorable? Not at all. Ospreay and Fletcher stands out as the match of the night. I saw people saying it was on their list for match of the year. Doesn't come close. I think Ospreay himself has had at least 2, maybe as many as 4, actually. Forgot about the Michael Oku match at the beginning of the year. Ospreay himself probably has 4 matches that were better than this in 2024 alone, which doesn't say anything to the quality of his match with Fletcher. It just says that, as in terms of match of year conversation, this was not up there for me. And outside of that, there really wasn't anything that overly notable on the show. Mercedes and Stat honestly stood out more than the vast majority of things on this card. And that's great because Monet badly needed that, and Stat had to get revitalized coming out of that Nightingale feud. But when I leave the show, we always ask 2 questions. Do I badly want to tune into television on Wednesday to find out what's going to happen next? Not really. Am I going to? Sure, yeah. But I don't have that desire right now. And on the back end, would I have felt that spending $50 for this show would have been worthwhile? Last pay-per-view, I said no. Here I'm kind of on the border, right? On one hand, there was a lot of content and there were some pretty interesting matches. But do I feel like that entire show was worth $50 when the vast majority of it was predictable? There was only one lower mid-card at this juncture title change that was done in an extremely poor fashion. And the 2 most exciting matches on the show, one I don't want to say we've seen it a million times, but we've seen Fletcher and Ospreay do what Fletcher and Ospreay do. And then other than that, we actually saw a really good match from Mercedes. Would I pay $50 for that? Not alone. I like her a lot. I like Stat a lot, but not just for that match. So I would ultimately kind of come around and say, no, I don't think this show would have been worth $50 on the back end. And that brings me to my final grade. And I agree with you all on the letter. I disagree slightly on the number. I'm going to be at a flat B, but I am coming down from my pre-show expectation grade of 86. And I'm going to fall at an 84 out of 100. It was a solid show. There was nothing wrong with it. I'd be extremely curious to see what happens Wednesday on Dynamite and whether that makes sense of some of the developments from Full Gear and perhaps allows me on the back end to look back at it and say, oh, okay, yeah, now I understand a little bit more why specifically they did that. But we give AEW the benefit of the doubt a lot of times, and frequently it does not deliver to that degree. So we have World's End coming up, I believe, in December towards the end of the month. And then AEW kicks off 2025 with a bang. I believe they're in Australia in February. I might have that date wrong, but I believe that's what's happening. So it's going to be super interesting to see the way this company moves forward with their creative. It still feels like it is in a significant lull. We see it in TV ratings. We've seen it in attendance for television tapings. Certainly pay-per-view attendance remains immensely strong. And we'll see what they do for a buy rate for this show. Now, those numbers kind of only come out from one source. And, that's kind of when AEW is giving you what they did, and there's no way to kind of confirm that. It's slightly questionable at best. That said, we'll see what they have to say with the number, and we will go from there. So, folks, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We have a loaded week for you. On Tuesday, we will have your WWE Survivor Series War Games Ultimate Preview. On Thursday, we will circle back to AEW Full Gear, break down the entire week in AEW, and of course, cover the latest from NXT. And next Saturday, similar bat time, similar bat channel will happen a few hours earlier. We should have your WWE Survivor Series War Games instant analysis. If you have not already, subscribe to the Getting Over Wrestling podcast wherever you listen to performance-enhancing audio. Also, remember that this show
is all about Defy.
So leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. On Apple, if you leave a 5-star written review, we will read that right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast and on Blue Sky at Getting Over. Episode drops, news, analysis, highlights. You get all of that. You can send in questions and comments for the show, and you can vote in our pre- and post-show polls, specifically on Twitter at Getting Overcast, but we are building our Blue Sky at Getting Over. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at Getting Overcast, and please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
So visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, sign up, You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audios, 5 minutes approximately for every major TV show, and exclusive analysis posts. All of that, $5 a month or $50 for the entire year. And this coming week, there might be a Black Friday special as well. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all so much for listening to this instant analysis edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back on Tuesday talking WWE Survivor Series War Games. This is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.